Hi, I'm Ed Bacon, the rector of All Saints Church, Pasadena. Whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on the journey of faith, I hope that you'll find something here that speaks to you. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I feel like we're having Christmas a little early because of this particularly wonderful speaker today. I have long wanted to have some connection with him because the first week I got here almost 15 years ago, one of the things that was part of my orientation was Peter Sellars was the greatest speaker in the Rector's Forum we ever had. And I said, wow, I can't wait to replicate that. Well, I was at Disney Hall not long ago, just bathed in this music, Oedipus Rex with Peter's staging. And I said, and Peter came out, and I said, we've got to have him. So I had one of those days from hell about a month ago. I know y'all never have these, but I was supposed to be at 3 different places at the same time, including Los Angeles and Arcadia and Pasadena. And I just couldn't do it all, and so I said, I'm going to Pasadena and have a glass of wine at Julienne's. That was one of the places I was supposed to be because Julie wanted a pastoral call, you understand, on her 20th anniversary of her having that wonderful bistro there in what's that called? San Marino. Anyway, I ran into another favorite person in my life, Sasha Anawalt. And I'm taking up too much time, but
It's a long story.
No, it's not a long story. Here we go. So Sasha, I called her. I said, she said, what about Peter coming? I said, can you make that happen? She says, absolutely. I just thought she was, one of the angel Gabriel or one of the wise men or something like that. I said, pull it off, and the Holy Spirit. And I wanted her to introduce Peter because she can give him all of the kind of the glory that it's due. Sasha is a friend of mine. She's a member of this wonderful parish. She's the director of USC Edinburgh Arts Journalism Programs. She's a writer about the arts. She teaches arts and journalism. Would you please welcome Sasha Anawalt?
Thank you, Ed. Thank you. I don't know how many of you were here in 1993 before the Los Angeles Festival when Peter came the last time to speak at the Forum. And he directed both the 1990 and the 1993 Los Angeles festivals. At that time when he was in the Forum, he talked to us about how there were more the most Native Americans living in America live in Los Angeles, that there were the most Koreans living outside of Korea live in Los Angeles, Filipinos outside of the Philippines, Vietnamese outside of Vietnam, Salvadorans outside of El Salvador. And I remember this hush of just kind of this extraordinary realization that came about how many different people from different cultures and different communities lived in Los Angeles. But beyond that, Peter took us, he made the festival free. Most of it was free. And the idea was that people would come together in spaces and see each other's cultures and begin to learn to listen and begin to learn to speak to each other and begin to understand each other. That was in 1993. He also left us with the caution of it was up to us. And at the center of everything that Peter does is this enormous creative activism. He teaches a class at UCLA of two titles. One is Art as Social Action, and one is Art as Moral Action. And at the center of everything he's done in his life, 40 productions in high school, 40 productions at Harvard in college, is this for social action and to keep our eyes and our ears and our minds and our hearts open for the possibilities of connecting one community to another community, to another community, to another community. And of course, all this can happen within art, which allows us to, has this sort of irrational possibilities inside of art in which you get to pretend to be something that you're not. And you can feel what it's like to be somebody else. And in that moment of feeling what it's like to be somebody else, you can understand each other. This happens again and again and again. Most recently, probably you have seen, and I hope, Ed mentioned Oedipus Rex, but also the Symphony of Psalms, Stravinsky's two works that Peter bound together and were the final production that Esa-Pekka Salonen did at the LA Philharmonic. And it was just the most healing, redemptive, breathtaking production. His work with Esa-Pekka Salonen defines the last 2 decades of Los Angeles art, really, and together also with people like John Adams, his collaborations with Nixon in China, the death of Klinghoffer, recently the Dr. Atomic, and then The Flowering Tree, which if you saw with these tremendous Cambodian dancers, was just amazing. Bill Viola, the soprano Dawn Upshaw. The work, even, I think Walt Disney Concert Hall embodies this, with Frank Gehry, this incredible democracy in which people can come together to share and to be marked. Peter says that the two attributes of activism are to show up, thank you for showing up, and to speak up. And he will speak up now, and I'm sure in join you. I welcome back home Peter Sellars.
Oh, wow. Hey, good morning, all you cosmically illuminated beings. It is truly thrilling to be here. And I have to say, one of the reasons the Los Angeles Festival could be free to most people who went is because a lot of people behind the scenes worked really hard and did amazing things. Bob Eggleston, for example, and other saints of the All Saints Parish truly made those Los Angeles festivals possible. And my time here is just always filled with so much joy. Thank you for what you're doing every day. Thank you for the volunteering. Thank you for the programs. Thank you for the extended embrace that this place represents, or actually more than that, the people in this place represent. And thank you for still maintaining that energy concentration here in Pasadena. It's awesome to be here. I have a bunch of things to talk about. I'm just in several time zones at once today, and bring me into this one. Please, anytime someone should just interrupt me if I'm saying something that seems really appalling, or stop me before I kill again. And it's a humanitarian act. And meanwhile, I do want to talk a little bit about the work I'm doing now, but also, and the work I'm doing now, because I've finished a kind of the last 5-year body of work, and I'm just beginning on a new set of things. And one of the reasons I want to talk about them this morning is I don't myself know where they will go. And one of the best things, as you know, when you're engaged in creative work is just talk about it aloud, because what you actually have to do is call the spirits down. And it's, in fact, the act of calling that is the most important thing, is you call and the spirits come. And that sense that you have to call in public, and you have to choose your mountaintop and call. So I treat All Saints as the mountaintop this morning, and I am really just going to call. And it's really, I'm an artist. I get to every single day do something I love with people I love. To me, that's the most important job description. And the more we can all just do that and do the things you care about with your conscience, with your time. Every minute, you're actually following your conscience. You're actually following the prompting of your heart. You're actually the person who's paid to do that. Most people are paid to ignore what their heart is telling them. And I tell my students, that in my generation, the devil was waiting and said, you should be really working for Citibank. And now my students are very lucky because the devil just got exhausted, and and now my students have no jobs, and there's nothing waiting for them, and so there's no reason they can't spend their lives doing something they love and care about. And I always tell them, if you're looking for a job, it's something that is not being done. And if the world needs it, that means you cannot get paid to do it. If the world doesn't need it, lots of money is available. You know, and the way you know you're doing something important is if no one will pay you. And so most of my work concerns the non-cash economy, which is actually the only real economy in the world, which is actually that you can't make money raising your kids. You know, you can't make money loving your grandmother. All the most important things in your life are actually obviously not related to money. And we're in a very bizarre situation where representative democracy has basically ceased to be representative, and it really is just the money talking. And if you listen to money, it's really an unhappy life. You know, there's poor Michael Jackson who's happier now. But you watch what money does, and you watch how it erodes the very core of what a society is meant to be. And obviously in the last 30 years we've created more billionaires than, you know, any civilization ever. And now the word civilization is threatened by the fact that it is the money speaking and nothing else. And that fragile moment of democracy in Greece, in Rome, where finally people keep voting, but in fact the money took over and it's an oligarchy all over again. We're there. And when the Congress openly says, we don't care what's good for the American people, we care what's good for the following 4 insurance companies, it's a very serious question of what representation is. And so one of the things we do in the arts is try and keep representation alive. Could we represent? Could we begin to hear from people we don't always hear from? And of course, one of my jobs is, you know, as you know from your own family, is not just the people who talk all the time. How do you get the person who hasn't said anything for a long time to speak, who we actually haven't heard from? How do you create the conditions where that person who feels it's not even worth speaking finally comes forward and knows they will be listened to and cherished? How do you engage in the deep listening? And you know this from your own family, not just about what people are saying, but what people are not saying. How do you listen to what is not being said? And how can you recognize the fact that it's not being said is actually the crisis? And what we do as artists is open the channels of communication that have shut. Because every time the channels of communication close, and you know this from your own family, there's violence. When you have to put a bomb in someone's car to say, I'm here, you can't act like I'm not here, and because you are acting like I'm not here, I will put a bomb in your car. In fact, the only way to move against violence is not an occupying army, is not equal force, but is a flood tide of love and creativity. That is to say, the situation looks like it has no solution. The negotiations have broken down, which means the solutions are going to have to be creative. Which is why artists exist, is to say we have to get beyond what's rational, because first of all, human beings are simply not rational. I mean, they're just not, and get over it. and so you have to speak to people at their irrational place. And the irrational place is dangerous and crazy and twisted and hurt and wounded. And in fact, frequently it's where people are wounded that they're really speaking from. They're not speaking from a rational place, they're speaking from a damaged place. And actually the place where we're damaged is the place where all of us are the most human. And the fact where God loves us most deeply is the contrite and broken spirit. Is we're most human not in our successes, which are horrifying, particularly if we start telling people about them. We're human and truly humble in the Greek sense and in the Christian sense. When we're broken, when we're confounded, when we don't know what's next, where we realize a higher power than us has to take over, when our ego actually is completely broken. And that place of humility, that place of needing to reach out, is the place of deepest and most beautiful humanity, where the Spirit shines forth. And that's why I spend my life on the difficult problems that we're not going to solve right away. They're going to be with us for generations and for centuries. Because the little things are just the little things. Martin Luther King tried to end poverty in America. Did he succeed? No. His failure echoes with deep redemption across the centuries. Romeo and Juliet, you know the names. It didn't work out. And yet that they tried to do what they tried to do means that 500 years later we know those names. Is taking on the stuff that we know we're not going to solve, but taking it on anyway because you have to take it on. Because again, that's where we're at our most human, is when we're in front of something that actually does call for prayer and fasting. For me, one of the most painful things about being a California resident at the moment is 30 years of very, 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 very bad legislation that has created the prison system. And you people know more about it than I do, but I'm in the middle of a certain element of it, which is, of course, teaching at the University of California, the formerly great university system that's on its knees right now. And to have my students be told of a 32% tuition hike, which passed 2 weeks ago without controversy inside the Board of Regents, and then to learn that there are further charges on the graduate students, and that, in fact, all of this dates back to the famous 1983. 1983, California, as a state, spent more money on education than any other state in America. And we maintained a university system of excellence and a public education system, K through 12, of excellence. Starting in 1983, the legislature did something pretty shocking. Is they decided in advance the next generation was going to fail. Starting in 1984, we built more prisons in the state of California than Mao Zedong and Joseph Stalin put together. We have the largest numbers of women incarcerated in the history of the planet. The number of women incarcerated has increased tenfold in the last 12 years. What's at stake and how we filled all these prisons so quickly was the drug war, which was designed as a way to reverse the civil rights movement. There had to be a race-neutral category called crime, which then could be applied to certain neighborhoods in a certain way. Because believe me, if you tried this policing in Beverly Hills or Brentwood, it would not last an afternoon. But in East LA and South LA, it's standard operating procedure. How many people made a mistake when you were a teenager? Hello. No one here was in trouble when they were a teenager. I know that. But in certain neighborhoods, to be in trouble as a teenager triggers a set of things that means you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison for little things. Go to the youth detention facility in Sylmar. Youth detention facility, it's a nightmare. You watch these 13-year-old girls drilled as a military academy for 2 years for fighting in school because we have zero tolerance in place. Now, of course, one of the things it means to be human is to learn tolerance. And we're teaching an entire generation zero tolerance. Zero. And we are currently spending $200,000 a year per child to lock up 13 and 14-year-olds. And we do not have $2,000 a year to educate them, feed them, nourish them in any way, but we do have $200,000 a year per child to destroy their lives in systems of such unbelievable cruelty. To watch 13-year-old girls barked at orders in a military-style boot camp, screamed at all day, as they march in formation from class to class, what it means to humiliate a person every day, break them down, and destroy their identity. It's actually not what most people needed when they were 13. What would you do to a 13-year-old girl is systematically destroy her sense of self? In the boot camps, no mirrors allowed. The girls are not allowed to know what they look like ever. And just simple, basic cruelty. Bedtime is at 8 p.m. And you get up at 4 to start cleaning. And at 8 p.m., those girls lie down in those huge dormitories. And you would think when they go to sleep, at least the punitive and retributive and vicious hand of the law would at least release its grip. Those girls are not allowed to curl up in bed, and they're not allowed to turn their faces into their pillows. They have to lie straight and look straight up. Go to Fillmore. I mean, the trouble is we're living in an age where most of us don't visit these places and don't know. If you knew what was being done in your name right now, it would not be acceptable for 1 second. We do know, the statistics are perfectly public, anybody in the juvenile system will spend the rest of their life in prison, 90%. And what it means that kids in these neighborhoods get into something which is then self-triggering. And you know, in the case of how parole works in California and why we have 90% recidivism is because parole is not set up to help anybody. It's set up to make sure you go back to prison by being triggered by tiny little things. And if any of you have made a mistake in your life, that day when you decide to change your life and you have to live differently and you have to find a new self-image for yourself and you have to change your habit energy and truly live a different way, you need all the support in the world from people around you. I mean, think of your own life. And you wouldn't have made it through if friends and family didn't just help you when you were broken. We have a system that breaks people when they're broken. And breaks them so far. As you know, in California, we've perfected the Supermax prison, which is the predecessor of Guantanamo. And the idea of the imprisonment of sensory deprivation and removing all human contact, which, as you know, is happening to kids in California. The removal of all human contact, particularly from kids, means they cease to be human. Because what makes you human is other humans. And what we've done through the sensory deprivation of these supermax lockdowns is, of course, create a generation of people that are going mad, losing their minds and losing their souls in total isolation, screaming into walls they're deaf. And the idea is the same idea as the Guantanamo idea, which is, technically there are no marks on the body, but the marks on the soul mean this person will never be a functioning human being ever again. $200,000 a year per child is what we have to spend. And at the other end, because for a couple of grams of drug possession, you're serving 25 to life. What that means is we have this gigantic aging prison population. People who have been having bad food, bad air, and no exercise, and a stunted life for 25 years, and of course they have every medical condition imaginable. And so therefore we're spending $200,000 a year for the older prisoners for their medical treatment. And because, of course, in the state of California, we can't let people die in prison, we want to kill them. So the death row prisoners in particular have state-of-the-art medical treatment because we want to actually kill them. And they can't die before we're ready to kill them. So I'm just talking about that today. You can go into it in greater detail. There are people who will, and I don't mean to depress you, except I will say, as the state of California is a bankrupt, the one budget that was not allowed to be touched, the largest department of the state of California is the Department of Corrections. The one budget that was not touched is this budget, which is destroying the lives of a generation. The legislature in 1983 decided that a whole generation would fail and prepared for them prisons and not schools. And you can look at the budget graphs. We are now from number one spender in prison in education, 1983, the state of California is number 50 in spending in education, and we are number one in spending in prisons. And the two graphs are a butterfly. You watch as the prison spending mounts, the education spending declines, and you can see it's a future that was prepared for our kids, a future where they will not be educated, but they will be not capacitated, but incapacitated. And we will spend anything on incapacitation, and we're unwilling to lift a finger for capacitation. Now, I mention this only because we're in a church, and as you know, your opportunity to see Jesus, because Jesus said, if you want to meet me, visit the prisoner. Your opportunity to meet Jesus is go to one of these youth facilities. Be a beacon of light in the life of one of these kids. And you can see what I'm talking about is not an exaggeration. I mean, I was shocked when I just started making simple visits. Or, just start the beginning of the chain. Go sit in the county court, juvenile court, and watch these kids be warehoused all day long, with the judges not unwilling even to look at these kids while sentencing them. And this insane overreaction, which is what we're all in the middle of now in America. Everything is this giant overreaction because we're so inundated with information that all we live is these reactive lives, or we're busy reacting to everything on the run. And we ourselves are not centering ourselves and claiming the agenda, but we're responding to all these agendas that are flying all around us. And in that distracted state, which is how they want you, why television is set up the way it's set up, and even now internet surfing, as long as you're distracted, you are powerless. Human beings' capacity for power is based on prayer. Prayer is based on meditation and concentration and focus. The act of focus, the act of concentration, is an act of spiritual transformation. That they get you to spend your whole life in a distracted, wild state, late for everything and not completing any one of your own thoughts, is the ultimate disempowerment. And what it means, empowerment, is the empowerment of prayer, is steady, focused concentration, attention, care, the focusing of our love, the recognition of beauty, and that the people Jesus preferred to hang out with were the prisoners. And that every one of these beings is the face of God. And there are no evil people. They're only children of God. And you can condemn the evil, but not the person. The person is actually meant for, as Jesus would say, the glory of God. Because it's only when you know the darkness that the light is powerful. It's only when you know hunger and thirst that that bread and that water become transforming. When I say thirst, I mean, again, the taste of water. One of my good friends, you may know, Dr. Maher Hathout, grew up, he's the head of the Islamic Center of Southern California, and I'm sure he's visited you guys, but he talks about his university being prison in Egypt because he fell afoul of the national government as part of the student movement there. And as you know, in Egypt, the only way to get a new president is to assassinate the current one. And In fact, Dr. Toot was not involved in an assassination plot, but as today in Egypt, any students that look like they have leadership potential are immediately arrested and are in prison. And the real university in Egypt is in prison. And of course, one of the special techniques to break people in prison is just to simply deprive them of water in Egypt. And Dr. Toot would go through sessions in solitary confinement deprived of water for days. And then finally, the first taste of water. You don't forget it your whole life. And you actually taste water. Most of us drink water all the time and never taste it. Coming from that depth of thirst, you taste it. What does it mean to taste our freedom? What does it mean to taste our joy? It's coming from a place where you haven't tasted it. And where it's necessary. And Rumi said, to increase your perception, increase your necessity. Most of us have things we would like to do, but not that are necessary. And when you identify necessity in your life, it changes how you perceive everything. Once you're coming from necessity. And I'll mention two things that I'm trying to do, and I'm speaking this morning because I love people here so much. And also because I live in California and it's unbearable to live in a situation like this where 100 years from now they'll say, what were these people thinking? Did no one notice? And it does feel like we're living in the time of the gulags. And a quarter of the population, if you count the people who are on parole. And again, parole is based on when you leave prison, you have 1 month to get a job. Of course, because you have a prison record, you can't get a job. You have 1 month to get a job or you go back to prison. You can't even leave you can't leave law school and get a job. But you have 1 month to get a job or a set of things is triggered that sends you right back. If you miss one of your parole meetings with your parole officers, then you go back to prison. Okay, now, if you've ever had a parole officer in the room, if any of you have ever had a parole officer, you know the drill here in LA with our insane budgets. It's that your parole officer has no time to meet with you. So you go and you spend 1 day waiting for your appointment. Doesn't respond to phone calls. You go back the next day. Okay, now how are you keeping the job you got 2 days ago when you suddenly didn't show up for 2 days for your new job? I mean, the entire system is a living nightmare. You also have to find a place to live in that first month. That's not your parents. So, of course, there's a 90% recidivism rate, but we're told, and the way it's reported in the press is because these are bad people. Not because we've put artificial hoops that no human being could jump through, let alone someone coming out in the state that people come out in. Where there's not only no support, there's active attempt to entrap people again. And as you leave prison, they say, you'll be back. Nobody says, good luck. They say, you'll be back. There's just not one bit of goodwill. The most basic goodwill. And obviously, we don't get into the drug war this morning, but now we have nearly 2 million people, because as you know, in the state of California, the people in prison, 3% of the people in prison for violent crime that have a victim. Everyone else is there for nonviolent crime. 80% of them for this drug war. Drugs, as you know, like alcohol, I mean, just same as in the 20s, prohibition just doesn't work. We have a 35-year drug war, and it has tripled the flow of drugs into America. So for whom is this a success? Well, you know from prohibition. As soon as prohibition was shut down by voters, you found out who was making the money, the cops. Prohibition, the enforcers were making the money. Same deal. And that's why it will never be shut down until voters really move. But after 10 years, people knew prohibition was a disaster in the 20s. The bizarre thing is how this has gone on for 35 years. And you know if you're dealing with alcohol, and you know when you're dealing with drugs, these are people who are suffering. These are people who need help, not just medical help. And I mean, yes, people need medical help, and they need a detox. But they also need love, because somebody's taking drugs because something else is wrong. And again, can we stop being the country of special effects and do, which is my job as an artist, is not to deal with special effects, but to deal with causes. This is that way. Why? What led to this? Okay, now what led to that? Okay, now what led to that? Just let's keep going back. It's not about the drugs. It's about human beings not being able to face their lives. And the drugs are at the wealthiest end of the society and at the poorest. Both sets of people can't face the next day. But the only way you can deal with drugs, just like alcohol, is it takes friends. Friends have to intervene. Friends have to be there. Friends have to get you through the darkest time. And we have set up a situation where people have no friends. Because what pulls you through addiction is a community. And we have removed people from a community of support. Now, one of my projects, and I'll just mention this because I want to go to a really joyous, redemptive zone here. No, and a joyous, redemptive zone, again, I'm just reminding you, that's the Jesus thing. The Jesus thing is the redemption is actually in the prison. The redemption, as everybody in this room knows, is the Good Samaritan thing. The redemption is everything you wanted to walk past. But actually, when you stopped and dealt with it, they were better and you were better. And what's painful in your life is just walking past and acting like you don't notice. And that's the Jesus thing of, if you want to see my face, visit that prisoner. Because I'm there. And when we get to heaven, Jesus will say, I know you. And you'll say, how do you know me? Because you visit me in prison. There was how many people know a Roman philosopher, Boethius, and the consolation of philosophy? Okay, well, for you people, bear with me. I'm just going to tell everyone else. End of the line, Rome. Total, 5th century Rome, total degradation, decline, a mess. Nothing we would recognize here in America. And the cynicism is so deep. It's like people vote, but they know it's not worth it. The whole deal. The last Roman emperors were not Roman; they were Goths, which was kind of hilarious in its own way. And finally, somebody said, you know what? How about if we hired for chief of staff at the White House a great moral philosopher? Wouldn't that raise the tone around here? We said, that sounds great. Let's do it. So they called up this guy Boethius, who was, because then Rome was Christian. He was a philosopher who was translating Plato and Aristotle into Christian terms and saying, okay, things that remain true no matter what, no matter where, no matter what the culture, no matter what the official religion. Is that these truths actually move across the centuries. And so these people remain relevant. And he wrote 6 books of the philosophy of music, which are kind of amazing. Pythagorean music of the spheres stuff. It's fantastic. He said, oh my God, I can't believe I got this call. I don't think I'm doing anything tomorrow. Sure, I'll come over. And so he's at the first, the meeting, general staff meeting in the office, and he just has to interrupt. He says, oh, you shouldn't take these people's homes away from them. It would just not be just. And everyone looks at him across the table, and it becomes incredibly irritating to have a great moral philosopher in the office every day. You just can't take care of basic business. So they have to get rid of him. So they frame him, and there's a show trial, trumped up charges, and he's thrown in the deepest dungeon they've got. And they've got rid of him. Nobody's going to hear from him ever again. And then a couple months later, they're irritated that he's still alive. So they get these giant clubs, and they go down there. He's not seen the sun since his sentencing. And they go down there with these giant clubs, and they just smash him into putty, and that's it. He's over with. He is finished. But during his last time in that dungeon, he wrote his last work, which is called The Consolation of Philosophy. And in this work, the goddess Philosophy walks through the cement and iron walls of his cell. And she sits down with him. And together, they sing songs about the nature of justice. Her first stuff is get over your self-pity. Stop feeling all wronged. It's just the wheel of fortune. You didn't complain when it was up, so you don't get to complain when it's down because you bought into it. And if you're going to take it there, you got to take it there. So get over it. And so that just dry your eyes, get up, wipe off the dust, and stop feeling so sorry for yourself. Step 1. Step 2, look more deeply. And across these 5 books, eventually the justice they sing about is Martin Luther King's The Universe Bends Towards Justice. Is in fact this cosmic justice of the planets, the stars, the divine equilibrium that is present in the world of the insects, it's present in the world of the flowers, it's present in the mountains, in the rivers, in the trees that are clapping for the glory of God. This justice that actually surrounds us and that goes into the cosmos. It's one of those most sublime texts. I wanted to stage it forever. And I couldn't find an English version that I loved. They were all written by crabbed old classicists and just didn't have the lift. And so there's a guy who I worked with years ago in one of my gang things in East LA who was a former gang member who has incredible stature, and stature enough that he actually left the gang. And he can still walk the streets of LA and people don't shoot him. And he's an amazing man. He has now 4 advanced degrees after being, with a serious arrest record. And he's just turned his life around. But more than that, he's devoted himself to turning other people's lives around. He was in charge of intake at the men's jail in downtown, specializing in the people who need to be sedated or strapped down. And he was the psychologist that would determine the placement. And, a fierce job. Just fierce. But somebody strong and fearless. And his job was just unbearable. And I'm always traveling, and my home is 5 floors of books. And Alex really loves philosophy, so he comes to my home on Sunday afternoons and just reads, to not be in men's jail and to not be in East LA, and just to have a quiet place to collect himself. And I handed him this book and said, Alex, you might be interested in that. And he just flipped out. He then sent it to his cousin, David, who's doing 25 to Life in Corcoran, who flipped out, then got a writing group together, and they're all working on it. And, of course, I realized where the text is going to come from. Is that a set of prisoners in Supermax lockdown in the state of California, people who are buried alive, will speak. And we will... and I can just tell you from 2 weeks ago that Carnegie Hall will present it. So it's a point of really bringing the dead to life. It's really a point of those that were buried will now be brought back and sing and speak and be alive again and be heard from and be recognized and be treasured and be welcomed and be cherished. Because every human being is the occasion for cherishing. Every human being is a treasure beyond treasure. Every human being is offering you your direct experience of the face of Jesus. And that act of cherishing, that act of reaching across all the stuff that they're presenting to you that you're pushing away from, the best way to maybe talk about that is just to say every one of us, we have this image of who we are, who we would like to be, and then we have how we behaved that day that you're a little less proud of. in fact, most human beings are in the same situation, is they're not proud of how they behaved either. And so our act is every day, as we meet every person, is to invite and permit them to be the person they wanted to be. And ourselves try to be that person also. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Peter Sellars.
Our mission at All Saints Church is to make God's love tangible 24/7, not only in the words on Sunday, but in our work and witness all week long. You can partner with All Saints Church in being a beacon of hope, compassion, and justice by making an online contribution today. Click on the Donate Now link on the Video Sermons webpage and join us and our friends from every corner of the world who are committed to turning the human race into the human family. Remember, it is in giving that we receive. And may God bless you and those you love, serve, and challenge today and always. Thank you.